Welcome to Authentic Living with Roxanne, a place where we have conscious conversations about things that really matter in our lives. And now, here's your host, Roxanne Derhaj.
Hi, everyone. It's Roxanne Derhaj. How are you today? So glad that you could tune in again. And this week I have I'm going to say another friend. I seem to be inviting all my friends, which is not a bad thing, to share some time with me on Authentic Living with Roxanne. So, Kanchan Prinsloo, I'm going to tell you a little story because I think this is interesting. And Kanchan's going to giggle, and she's the ultimate personality that just shares her wisdom in a quiet way. So we were talking earlier, getting prepped, and what I was doing is I was mispronouncing her name, not intentionally, but another colleague, Jessica Potts, says, Roxanne, you're saying it wrong. And I hadn't thought about it. And I think I've been a little bit haphazard sometimes with names. So Kanchan was very awesome in that she said to remember the word luncheon, that rhymes with Kanchan. So Kanchan, tell us what want to talk a little bit about names, and kind of that's a different way to get into it, right? Because we're talking about women of culture. I'm from Trinidad and Tobago, and I know that's my nationality, but my background is Middle Eastern and Indian, and your nationality obviously is Canadian, now that mine is as well. But your ethnicity is also South Asian. Is that the correct term?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I didn't grow up calling it South Asian, but yeah, that is the term. And so names, that's big, because for me, only in the last, I would say, probably 5 years have I started to use the way my mother has pronounced my name, the way my family pronounces my name, which is Kanchan. And I have done it with a sense of pride, whereas before, the anglicized version is Kanchan. I respond to both. The difference is me. I now say my name is pronounced Kanchan, rhymes with luncheon, in case you're wanting to know. And that was a really big thing that, so my husband is not South Asian, and he's pronounced my name Kanchan. And that's when I realized, you know what? It's not that it's hard. I have projected that on. So I need to be able to start claiming the actual pronunciation of my name. And so for the last, I would say a few years, definitely years, that I've really started to own the name that my mother, my grandparents, my lineage has really wanted it to be.
So tell me, like, we're talking, we get technical as we talk about semantics and pronunciation and lots of different things. And I think, in kind of thinking about this, like I'm thinking I have a very, English name, so I've never had that issue. And now, there's a sensitivity that, even myself as your friend, I'm thinking, wow, I've been kind of doing this not so right for a long time. So there's an awareness. And you shared with one of our friends that women of culture, or, a diversity, sometimes will, I'm going to use the word, give everybody a hall pass to say, oh, that's all right. And to really kind of, to be an ally. And we'll talk a little bit about allyship, I'm sure today. It's about when someone says that, to say to them, no, it's something that I really want to make an effort with. And that's been I would say, the shift that we're experiencing now with a lot more of our knowledge in being culturally diverse.
I agree. One is the knowledge. The other is because of our heightened awareness. And I would actually say that's actually only been 2 years since George Floyd's murder have people started to unpack their own journeys. So even though I may have started using it earlier than that, it's still the awareness in our society that, oh, I have to ask the question, or I want to ask the question is a more generative approach to it. And so it makes it safer for me to go, well, no, actually it's this, because
Mhm.
I think names are a simple example of, I mean, even when I think about women of culture, I mean, even changing that title from women of culture, color,
Mhm.
women of culture brings in all of what you and I have just talked about, which is when I think about who I am, it's, all of who I am, that makes me unique. It is my culture. It is my heritage. It's my thoughts, my values, my traditions, is
Mhm.
the lens that I look at as I show up in the world. And it is unique, and it has me on the outside. It's not part of the dominant culture. The culture that I grew up with is not part of it. So then I look at, okay, how am I, which is my name. Let's bring that back again.
Right.
It's my name and how I pronounce it, how I'm asking others to pronounce it. And quite frankly, some it's easy to do, others not so much.
Mhm.
You know, your tongue may not roll with that. It may not, so it's a little bit harder, and that's okay. I'm, uh, I feel safer to be able to bring it forward now, for sure.
Isn't that interesting, right? So it's the same thing with myself, right? Like, I had an English name because my mom's oldest sister liked the name Roxanne, and my middle name is Jasmine. And I would get, and so listen to this, interesting, right? People go, "Oh, I love that name, Jasmine," and I'm like, "Oh, I've hated that name all my life." And everybody's like, "But it's so unique. It's so kind of, with Aladdin," and I'm like, I still hate that name, because it got popularized because of that Disney movie, but it was never a name that I just didn't like, just because as a child, I just didn't like the name. But it's, again, something small. But I think what I hear you saying is that now that we have more knowledge, it's just being aware, to say to someone, and can you help me understand how you pronounce that? And we're talking different cultures, but it could be like a German name, like or something like that, that we're not aware of how to enunciate accordingly, and we're not going to get it all right. Other than the fact that you're trying, I think that's important. So thanks for spending that time, just you know talking about this little thing. But I think sometimes little things mean a lot as we kind of talk about awareness. So tell
And
us about you. Sorry, go ahead, Kanchan. You were going to
no,
say
no.
something.
Well, I was going to say what it leads into is the first thing that we need to do as women of culture to live authentically, which is really start to get to know what is our heritage.
Yeah.
We taking the time to look at, and I always turn back because I think of the lineage that is behind me that has
Mm.
gotten me where I am. So for me to start to ask the questions and get clear on what is my culture, that's on us. So to live
Mhm.
authentically means we need to be seated in it. Now, I'm not talking first, second, third generation Canadians where it's, we're all Canadian, and it's okay. And where's our ethnicity from, and understanding that enough. And trust me, your parents will love it. Your grandparents will love it. Whoever it is, they want to be able to sort of draw out what that is, for us. So it just sort of, as I think about living authentically, that's one of the first steps we need to do.
So what's your legacy story? And I talk about a lot about leadership story, and in exploring my space for my book, what I really, at that time, what happened for me is, as we were writing, and Kanchan and I are also in the same writing group. I was One of my cousins sent me a 6-part YouTube series on indentured laborers from Trinidad and Tobago. So as I'm writing, it was kind of at the same time, and these clips were done by the University of the West Indies, and and I looked at it, and it impacted me because I recognized that, my goodness, that's part of my culture. I didn't, see it from that frame, but I grew up around cane fields. But my thing as a child is I was, running around playing hide and go seek. And if for any Trinidadians listening, we would catch little fish that were called wabines, and we would, that's how we played. But when I started as an adult looking at that, I looked at the reality of the heritage and what it took and what that meant to me, and the work ethic and the survivability that my ancestors, my great grandparents had to go through to come to the island and then be able to meld and create a life, losing their culture, some of them losing language, some of them having to bring certain things with them on that ship. And that's for the people that survived, Kanchan, right? So
Exactly.
it's funny how when you say about, what is your heritage, what are your values, and how does that inform you today? So tell us a little bit about your path. Like, did you start off working with women of diversity as an executive coach, or where did you begin?
I began doing my first career for 26 years in a way that my parents wanted me to. I got into healthcare and I was in leadership positions for 26 years. And I always knew when I had, that the way that I could support leadership is my passion, making sure that we have strong leadership, and which takes me down the path of the most underrepresented are women of culture, women of color, is what the statistics say. We've got 4% senior, in the C-suite, 4% representation for women of color compared to 60%, 60 plus percent of white male. And it goes down. Men of color are about 9%. That's the statistics from last year. So when I turn around and I look at that, it's like there's underrepresentation. My focus as an executive coach and with my company is elevating women of color today, women of culture today. And the biggest piece of that is because beyond underrepresentation, they are the best kept secret. They feel that, the organizations start to see that. So yes, there is more attention to bringing people into organizations, big corporations, and that are of people of culture. They're bringing them in. The question is, how do we keep them in the organizations? And that's been where I spend a lot of time with executives, both the leaders of and women of culture, to make sure that there is a deeper understanding of what is the reality. So especially when we think about, living authentically, there is one aspect of that, which is all around for the women of culture. And I'm just going to leap into it. Yes, we need to understand our heritage. We need to understand our own heritage. Why? Because we spend a lot of time trying to fit in, trying to cover. I did. Mm-hmm. For 26 years, I did. I was in a leadership position. Well, what does professional look like? Well, professional looks like whatever the systemic structures are in place in that organization. Mm-hmm. Now, those systemic structures are set in place with the senior leaders, which predominantly happen to be white male. Mm-hmm. Those structures set in place get me back to the point of, yes, I'm going to cover, I'm going to fit in. And hopes to belong, not realizing that my push to fit in, which is to adapt who I am, how I show up, actually stops me from belonging. Now, belonging is different from fitting in. You and I have talked about this before, Roxanne, but fitting in is I'm hoping I can get in and blend and do everything else. Whereas belonging is that I am accepted for who I am. Mm-hmm. Well, I haven't even got to belonging because I am way too busy making sure I bring a sandwich and not any Indian food to lunch, make sure that I am suited and booted in a way that's so professional so nobody questions that who I am or what role I may have. I mean, there's different ways of covering in terms of getting into the workspace. So leading authentically as a woman of culture means that we have to, first of all, know what our heritage and culture is, so we can start to pause and realize, what do I do all the time to make sure that I am not bigger than, I am trying to blend in, not really, I want to stand out, I want the next promotion because I am ambitious, but I'm not sure how to do that because I'm always a little bit on the outside.
Absolutely. And I'm going to tell you a childhood story, and then for anybody that's listening from Trinidad. So Trinidad is about 51% African American, say 48% East Asian descent, and maybe 1% other, right? And I went to a high school, and the Indian children would bring, roti and, talkari is with basically a way, and I don't know if this is the same term with what you use, but vegetables and stuff like that. I remember, my mom didn't do that, but some of the moms that did it, which now in retrospect, I think, oh my goodness, the work that it took, they hit it.
Yeah.
And now I look back and I'm thinking I was also complicit because my mother wasn't doing that in the morning, but the kids that grew up in those homes where the parents or the mother generally was doing that the first thing in the morning. That's a lot of laboring. And now I look at it as a mom, I look at it as a labor of love. But even in that time in Trinidad, there was that hiding. And now I think it would be such, an honor to say, wow, my kid's coming to school with a hot lunch. My mom made it first thing in the morning. But it's funny, the nuances, even of the time, even on an island where there is ultimate diversity, there is still that wanting to fit in. And now it's kind of like, wow, that's amazing that the frame that we have shifted, and that awareness that we're talking about even more so in corporate culture today.
Yeah.
What women of culture have to do to accept that space, but also to go into it and say, I am who I am. I want to lead, but I want to lead in a space that is right for me.
It reminds me of a executive client of mine that I had. Her story was phenomenal in terms of her journey from Africa to her small village. She's, KPMG, even there, comes to Canada, husband, small child, gets scooped up by one of the banks here as one of the interns. She did her master's. She's got no support at this point. Comes in and she said she spent literally the first 3 years making sure her hair was flat ironed. She would, just a lot of effort, the suits, buying clothes. She said, I couldn't even really afford.
Mhm.
She was before I go into a meeting, knowing that I had to just do that one extra hair because it was starting to curl up. And she goes, the amount of effort that I take. And I realized that, you know what? I'm exhausted. And I'm already doubling up on the work that I'm doing. So I look like I've got the competence to do. I am exhausted. And I don't know where to go from here. I don't know the handbook, was the comment she made, to
Mhm.
get to the next level. And it's like, right, we're spending so much of our energy in spaces thinking that we're doing the right things to fit in. Where in
Mhm.
essence, what we need to be doing is really getting clear, what is our value? Assessing what our value is. And
Mhm.
then making sure that you not only know it, but you start to articulate it. That is just so critical, because we've lost perspective of getting clear on what our value is. And we're so focused outwardly on how we think things need to be.
It's interesting because I was in corporate for about 15 years as well, and I so understand,
Yeah.
that story you're telling, because like you said, fitting in, you want to produce, you don't want to stick out, and all those things. Now there is a shift to say, and we recognize that the bottom line is impacted by diversity of thought, value, decision making, and you get a compilation of diverse age, stage, culture, perspective, small, big, and then it's like the perfect soup that is now being recognized in the workplace. I
Right.
would say that when I was in corporate, back in say 1995 or so, there wasn't that. If there was knowledge, it wasn't openly discussed. But today, with a lot of companies, they recognize that they're looking not just diversity, say for instance in culture, but neurodiversity is a big thing. Where we're recognizing, if someone's on the spectrum, they are going to bring such breadth. Whereas I had never heard that dialogue previously, right? It was like, if you were on the spectrum, it was like, oh boy, how are you going to get a job and do something, and especially in a leadership position. And now we're looking at people's differences as strengths. I'm sure you can tell me where we are in the workplace now in reference to diversity, with understanding the openness that at least I think I'm seeing out there with companies.
100% you're seeing it out there, and companies know it. Companies, there is research that shows companies produce, bottom line, dollars and cents, 35% better by having diversity at the table, diversity of thought, diversity of experience. So you have different perspectives.
35%, Kanchan?
30, this is
Wow.
dollars on a table. You're leaving it on the table if you don't even look at this. So
That's amazing.
it is substantial, and there is awareness to it. There's heightened awareness to it. And it is because, guess what? We need creativity. We need a company, an organization that looks like our client base. That's the other piece of it. Also, when you have more people that look like you, can interact with you, your enjoyment level, your creativity increases. There's a variety of reasons why that 35% is there. And you're 100% right. It is absolutely coming to the table for a reason.
And with globalization and the fact here in Canada, I know our level of people having children have dropped. And, so you're getting a lot of more diversity. When I came to Canada, and I'm going to date myself, back in 1983, I went to Mississauga. There was not that much diversity. Okay. Now I live in Niagara. I go to Mississauga now, and I'm like, this is not the same city that I came into, right? It's completely different, where most people are of color, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, this is such a flip even from where I live, because I live in a very homogeneous little town. So I think the shift has happened, and now the numbers and the metrics accordingly, from what you're saying, 35% is showing. But in leadership positions, let's get back to leadership. Men, you're saying 9%, women 4%. That's substantively low to 60% within companies. So where are we at in reference to, well, one thing to know the 35%, what are you seeing in companies? Is it that there is tracks to increase that 4% number with women of culture?
There definitely is. There is awareness to it. So one is awareness. The other is attention to. So we as women of culture, people of culture, men or women, we don't need mentors. We need sponsors.
Okay.
So what's happening is that the lens on how do we get more diversity higher up into higher positions, there's a spotlight on it a lot more now. And I hear that's through conversations with executives that, so there is a lot of understanding in terms of there is a benefit to having this. So the spotlight, meaning there is a more attention to sponsorship, and there can be leaps and heaps more of it. Because it's a sponsorship that's going to pull you through the organization. And
let's explain sponsorship, because I know what it is, and I know obviously you live in that world. Explain to the average person what sponsorship means, to be able to kind of get up the ranks to get to the different levels of the company.
So let me tell you the difference between mentorship and sponsorship. So mentorship is someone that is in your business, knows a little bit more, and help to guide you, mentoring you into what they know and how they are able to help you increase your abilities. Sponsorship is someone that is in a senior position that is there and invested in your growth in the organization. So what does that mean? That if you have something going on and you need to, this person will pick up that call within 5 minutes to go, yes, I'm here to support you. What's going on? What's the questions you have? And yes, here's something you need to be aware of. But more importantly, they are sharing your name in the rooms that have closed doors. Those are the important things, that when your name needs to be brought up, when we're looking at who do we want to be leveling up, who do we want to be promoting, your name needs to come to the table. Your sponsor brings that to the table.
So let's talk about, how do you get a sponsor? Like, you're a young female. You've got the degrees that are necessary for the position to climb the ranks within the company. What are some of the things, first of all, that you need to consider within the company, and how is it what qualities are you looking for in a sponsor, and how do you approach? That's 3 questions in one, Kanchan. So break them up and see if you can answer a bit, if if not most of it.
So one of the key things about getting a sponsor is that you are totally focused on building relationship. So you can't go up to a senior leader and go, will you sponsor me? They need to know who you are. They're using their social capital on you. So we need to be sure that we are having those conversations with these potential sponsors. And it may start out as a mentorship conversation. It may start out as frequent connection points that you are one. And to do those frequent connections, how do you get a sponsor? You build relationship. You come to the table, you come to the coffee with not only a question of them, but a sharing of you. Period. You come researched, you come prepared, you go in. Every conversation is valuable to them. They're invested as well. I mean, senior leaders in organizations, one of their key roles is to develop talent. So they are interested in being at that table. It's not a lot of times we can weaponize gratitude. Oh my God, I'm so thankful to be here. This is so good. Thank you. And it's like, no, we need to show up with what do we know? What's happening in our world? What's happening in these last 3 months for you? Or whenever the frequency of meeting is from our last meeting. So getting a sponsor means having relationships, building the relationships. No one cares for your career like you do. So invest.
Absolutely. But I listen to you and I think about culturally, right? Like, how does this? I have to develop the skill somehow, because I don't want to come across as I'm bravado and I'm looking at climbing. Some culture says you actually do that in a different way. So I could see how having some coaching like with someone like yourself would be important, because how is it that I know I'm not overdoing it? How is it that I know what to educate myself on? And how do I approach the sponsor, which could be intimidating as well. And if you do get a no, how is it that you kind of synthesize that in a way that says, oh, well, that one didn't work, but what can I learn from it, and those types of things.
So I'm going to start backwards with what you just said. You get a no, don't take it personal. Who knows what else? That's huge.
Right.
You are not broken. Don't take it personal. 2 big things that we have to be aware of. I agree with you. A lot of the time that I spend as an executive coach is helping create an environment to have those conversations around, you actually don't need permission for X. You don't need that. Your cultural upbringing, how does that marry up to the one that we're in when it comes down to a work environment? And it's being attentive to it. It's still, as a woman of culture or as a person of culture, we still need to know what our value is. I mean, one of our biggest superpowers as people of culture is resiliency. And guess what? Through the pandemic, we have needed resiliency. Up the yin yang. That's probably not the most professional phrasing, but we have needed resiliency. This is a massive impact to an organization. They need leaders that understand resiliency, and what does that mean? So there's the piece around how do we come into that, leaning into what our strengths are as a person of culture, and also where does our culture, where does it sort of clash, go counter to what the organizational culture is. So
that's such a powerful parallel when I think of it, and I go back again and I think of again my background. My dad told me a story. I got to tell you this story, Kanchan. It was there's something about being in your 80s, and my dad's going to be 86, right? So I said, Daddy, like, I met him, of course, when I came and knew anything about work. He was already an executive. So I didn't see the early beginnings. And he said to me, there was a point, his family was so poor, Kanchan, that he rode a bicycle to work. And I'm like, what? I said, Dad, how come? He said, I didn't want that legacy to be passed on to you and your siblings, because I had to go through that, but I ensured that the future generations wouldn't have to do something like that. And I said, Daddy, that is so important. That would have been so important. I'm saying it now as an adult, but as a teenager to have understood that, because there was an entitlement that came from the privilege that I was born into, but I didn't see the backstory. So that powerfulness, like that resilience, like you're talking about, now I get some of why, my background and who I am that I would not have gotten before.
Exactly. Perseverance. Your father just shows a degree of perseverance to clarity
Mhm.
of mind to know where he wants to be, what's he doing, and he'll do it. Like it's just a really powerful piece when we start reflecting back on what is
Mm.
our lineage, what are the lessons we've been taught, and what is
Right.
the value that we have when we step into our workspaces.
And that diversity, again, going back to that diversity of experience, of thought, of age, all that stuff. And I just think of it that, and going back to that 35%, it makes a lot of sense. Now, what I'm wondering is, how well are we doing in the workplace with what you're with the coaching that you're doing now? Like we're talking about the 4% specifically with women. Um, and I know women massively left the workplace
Yes,
over the pandemic. So
absolutely.
what did that kind of mirror? Women of culture and executive positions, did they equally leave corporate at that level as
Yeah.
well?
So people of culture were hit hardest. The research, McKinsey's research from COVID, really spoke to that. Yes, women. There was a massive exodus when it came down to the impact of pandemic and where we are as women leaders and getting our numbers up to have equal, a little bit of representation, a little bit more representation. That the numbers, the exodus is almost setting us back 50 years of representation within
50 years.
organizations because of the burnout, the numbers are horrific, and the numbers are even more horrific for Black leaders,
Mm.
Black women leaders. And it's because of, and again, yes, this is a McKinsey study is done in the U.S. The impact, the hardships, the impact to family. When we all talked about, and the disparity of healthcare, the many factors
Mhm.
that layered onto the burnout and the underrepresentation. So we are setting ourselves backward when it comes down to from the pandemic. What am I seeing? The other thing that I am seeing that I had not seen is women executives asking for a woman of color executive coach. I've never
Mm.
seen it so blatantly asked for, where a company, and when I speak to them, I said, how did you come to this point? Like, how did you go, no,
Mhm.
I am going to ask my company for a woman that looks like me, that is in this space and speaks like this.
Mhm.
And they're just, yeah, like,
Mm.
I'm exhausted. I'm tired. I need support.
Yeah, yeah.
It's an interesting, that's been a shift that I have never
Mm.
seen before,
Right.
that I have in this past 2 years.
So I have one. I know you and I can probably talk for extended periods, but I want one last nuance. I want to talk about if I am, leading, and I'm not a senior leader that's of color. Um, how we've talked a lot about, allyship and sponsorship, those types of things. What if I am a woman of culture and I am leading a team with diversity? Is there some things that we maybe need to kind of look at there, or some things that you can share with us about that?
So the piece that I see, because those are the executives that I end up working with, so women of culture that are leading large teams, and what I'm aware of is, and it's not just women of culture, women in general hold the attention to diversity more than anyone else. as from a leadership perspective. So they are the ones that are championing diversity. Off the side of their desk, I might add. So it's a really interesting thing. But being a woman of culture, one of the things that I have seen is that their awareness to their journey heightens how they end up working with their teams. So when I'm coaching, when we're doing our coaching, we unpack a lot of this, and it's like, yes, I'm very sensitive to. I had an executive that left the organization, and they were going to be coming back in, and some senior leadership said, "Well, they already left the organization. Do we really want them back in?" And she's like, "Well, no, they came back with a tremendous," so she came with a completely different perspective of what needed to happen. That this was the right person coming with a diversity of experience now that we want to have them come back in again. And so it's like, right, there's that. So the benefit that I have seen with a lot of the women of culture leaders is that they have got the space and grace to really reflect on what's needed.
I like that, space and grace, because obviously women are known to be more aligned or have the affinity to transformational elements to leadership. And then you're layering on the elements like we talked about, resilience and path and culture and values, beliefs, assumptions, all those things. And then that's quite the combination of things that you're kind of putting all together.
Yeah.
Now, Kanchan, for women listening, any last tips that you have for them? Let's say they're saying, I'm not sure, I've never approached people. What kind of things might they want? What a couple of little tips for you to give people that are listening that might want to kind of deal with diversity in their environment, but they're feeling like, it's not, women aren't taken seriously.
Just so I'm clear, so this is coming from a woman's, the leader's perspective, or from the women of culture leaders' perspective?
Women of culture's leaders' perspective.
So if they're feeling they're not being taken seriously, there may be a reason for it. So unpack what's true and what's not true.
Okay, look at the objective frame and make sure that you're looking at what is real and what is subjective, and maybe what might be blocking you. Okay, that's a good point.
So there's that. Also, part of finding out what's real, find out what is happening what is your brand? Ask 3 leaders, what are the first 3 words that come up for you when you think of me? And get clarity on that. And as well, while they're doing that exercise, you turn around and jot down, what are the 3 words I hope to be represented as? Is there a big disparity against that?
Okay.
Keep learning. Self-awareness is absolutely key. Take time. A lot of women of culture, we don't invest a lot in ourselves. I'll speak for myself. I never did. I have 2 coaches. That I have, and I have a large community that I work with, because development and continuing to grow is going to make the difference in how I show up. So I would say those are the 2 things that are within your control today as to how you want to start to make the connections for yourself as you move forward in a strategic plan for your career.
I love it. Looking at the disparity, right? Because it's so hard for us to see ourselves objectively. We may not recognize some of those blockages, right? Those blind spots. What are the 3 qualities that you think you have? What is it that, like you said, 3 leaders are seeing? And then kind of, is there a big disparity? And what steps, if there are some disparities, to enhance those based on the level that I'm trying to achieve within the organization? Now, I've learned so much today. My in my space, just talking to you with the kind of work that you do. For others that are out there and they're thinking, I'd like to have a chat, or I'd like to explore some of the things that you've talked about, whether it's allyship or sponsorship or having a woman of culture executive coach, why don't you tell people where they can reach you so that they can reach out and connect?
LinkedIn is great. reach out on LinkedIn, Kanchan Prinsloo. The spelling is down there, but reach out on LinkedIn. Also, if you want to reach out on my website, which my company is Capri Consulting, starts with a K, but it's Capri. LinkedIn's the easiest, I believe.
Well, thank you so much. So what am I walking away with? I talk about authenticity and, in reflecting and, listening to Kanchan and what she does, it makes me realize how much of what I do is based on my value, and even telling you that little story about my dad. And for people out there, whether you're just someone that's, a woman of a culture leader, or just someone that's trying to understand what is the frame that I'm coming forward with, how authentic am I being? Reflect on that, and ask the questions to Kanchan's point. What do I think how am I viewed, and how am I really looking at myself, and try to kind of figure out the disparity between those, and think, what skills do I have? What skills do I need to accentuate, and what skills do I not have, and maybe areas that I may be a bit more sensitive in that I need to work through. So what I'd like to invite you to do is to, as you can see at the bottom of my picture, there is roxannedurhodge.com/quiz. What you can do is, if you just want to know, how authentic am I being at work or at home, there's also the option, just a quick quiz. You go on, and it doesn't take too long. We pop some information, and we send a report back to you. So you can, if you have the time, it's not that long, go on and try that. Again, Kanchan, thanks so much. This has been a great topic, something that I know we will continue to explore. Kanchan has also given me the privilege of attending a Forbes Executive Women's Council, where we discussed this at length. And I could tell you that for sure that is something that in corporate environments we are continually exploring. And I'm sure a lot will get enhanced as things go. So again, thanks again, everyone. Thanks so much. And looking forward to any additional questions. Please reach out to Kanchan. All the information about her will be in the show notes. Again, take care, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in to Authentic Living with Roxanne, creating the space for positive, healthy change. Roxanne is a keynote speaker, psychotherapist, and coach. To work with Roxanne, visit roxannedurhodge.com/blueprint. We'll see you next time on Authentic Living with Roxanne.